Did ancient alien civilizations or star nations visit the Earth long before us, and as the ancient alien theory suggests, did they actually seed life on Earth? Are these ETs still visiting us, and are some even here among us? What is a starseed and how do they differ from others? Are some ETs watching over us trying to help us peacefully evolve and reach a greater cosmic awareness? Are there more sinister and malevolent ETs who want to enslave us or who do not have our best interests at heart? Are some of these ETs concerned with how we have treated the Earth and with our violent history? Author, healer, and spiritualist Eva Marquez joins me to talk about these ETs or star nations and how they may be interacting and influencing us here on Earth. Okay, so my guest tonight is Eva Marquez, and Eva is a spiritual counselor and healer, author, teacher, and writer. In her spiritual work, she utilizes her inherited Pleiadian energy, remembered the language of the light, along with many other ancient soul memories, and works with her guides, who are a collective group of light beings from various star nations. Eva she has written several books, to include the one I want to talk to her most about tonight, and that is A Starseed Guide, Andromeda, Pleiadians, and Sirius, Volume 1. She's written several other books on starseeds and on energy and the soul, and it's a pleasure to have her joining me on the show tonight. Eva, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, it's exciting, and Eva, this is fascinating stuff. It really is. And I really, before we kind of get into the discussion about the book and these light beings, as you like to call them, I'll refer to them as extraterrestrials. That's kind of just, or ETs. I think that's kind of the terminology I'm used to. But I think it's interesting that there seems to be more to this than that. Perhaps they're just visiting us in certain craft and that sort of thing. But again, before we get into that discussion, can you take us back to kind of how this journey all started for you and how you got involved in the work you're doing and in connecting with these light beings?
Okay, so I was born different, as many of us starseeds would say, which would mean that I would feel the energy since I was a little child. However, I never could understand it, and I thought I'm just hunted by the ghosts or feeling these dark energies around me, because if you ever felt the ghosts, that's how I felt around me all the time. I have seen the UFO twice in the Czech Republic where I grew up. Big lights in the sky, so here goes your words of the UFO, which I found very, very fascinating. But I never thought that's going to become my way of line of the job furthermore. It was when I moved to the USA, it would be in the 98, I more embarked on this journey. In the 2000, I started to experience this very unpleasant side effect of the starseeds, that we would call extreme sensitivity of the sound in my ears, feeling emotions of the people, which almost caused me a nervous breakdown. Later on, I tried to avoid all of this and live a normal life, which I tried really hard back then. And had 2 children, and later on, I became ill with the Lyme disease, which very much opened me to a new way of life, to finding the healing, getting myself back in life, because my children were very little. I had 2 small children, but I think 2 and 4 years old back then. And so I started to search for an answer. I started to look for the healing, which I totally believed that I will be able to do. And I did heal my Lyme disease. And I found a book. I had a friend who borrowed me a book, Open to Channel by the Sanaya Roman. And so we would read the book together and try to connect with our guides and just sort of feel what is it that people talk about. And I had a really hard time, I guess, to connect. And then one day I would wash the dishes and I feel this presence beside me. And I hear the word, "Can you?" and the Pleiadians. Back then, I didn't know what is the Pleiadians. So I went, as many of us, and Googled what the Pleiadians is, and I found it's a star cluster. And then I would start speaking this very strange language, which is the language of light, which I didn't know about much either back then. And I just burst out into tears and had this feeling that you can't possibly feel in the worldly life, I think. And that got me on this journey to search for more, to have that feeling, to understand this, to what it is. And that's how it all started.
Now, that's interesting. So this is, you kind of feel it's kind of channeling through you. Is that how this happens? It's almost as if they are speaking through you telepathically. How exactly does that work when you're kind of getting this language or these messages? Is it kind of just getting channeled through you? Is that a way to describe it? Or maybe can you explain that?
Well, that gets even more interesting. So in the beginning, I thought that it's just a channel through me, that I'm this channel as other people talk about, that they have this being that comes to them and they channel it. And I would say that's the easiest way. At least I saw it as the easiest way. But it didn't work out that like for me. Suddenly this being started to saying that I had a life in the Pleiadians. And I could feel this energy from there. And I am kind of the person who likes to question the things. I don't blindly believe in everything that we hear or perceive and so much on. And so I would be questioning, how does it possible? How it could be from somewhere there and be here, human in the body, going through a difficult time, because I was going through a difficult time of the ending of my marriage and getting out of the illness, and how it can be. So what I realized, and it took me several years to realize, that I have a memory, is that there's a part of the channeling that I'm part of this group of the beings. I sort of make a fun out of it. They're out there and they send me out here as an ambassador. Now, many of us have the same story. It is not just me. And we connected to this collective group of the beings, and we become one of these beings. They give you some channeling information or the advice, but they send you on the journey of the research and helps you to awaken your own memory in the timeline on the earth and beyond. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. So I guess what I would ask is, uh, a lot of people have these psychic or medium abilities. Do you think a lot of them are able to kind of channel these beings through? I mean, some say, they may be channeling spirits from beyond. Is this very similar to that with these beings and how they interact? Very similar to how, say, a spirit from beyond the veil may be interacting?
I think there's a little bit of the difference. So when we talk about the spirit beyond the veil, we're looking around the energy that is set closely to the earth. So I see it as or I sense it. I don't see really things. I sense them. I sense them in the level of the frequencies, sort of like imagining in the story of the house or the elevator. So the spirit would be in this first level around the earth. And I would say almost anybody can connect with the spirit and have that communication, because despite where we came from, we all have an ability to sense the subtle energy or the understand the unknown. So by practicing your clairsentience ability and letting go of your wanting and the need, you can connect with the spirits. Some people are more gifted, of course, to connect with the spirits, and the spirits talk to them and having sort of good information for their purpose, for whatever purpose it is, or connect with the family, bring the peace into difficult passing or something, bring the unconditional love. Then another level is the healing level, where the healers reach into this energy, where there's sort of like a packet of the healing energy. We connect the universal and the earth energy and burning for the healing. About this energy, we would connect to these extraterrestrial energies. So in other words, extraterrestrial energy would be higher vibrational energy than the spirit. And the spirit, let's say that your and my spirit didn't land that much, or doesn't know about these extraterrestrials yet, and it's kind of in this realm. However, when you come back home, as we would say, and you are extraterrestrial. So you are in this higher vibrational energy. And that is different. It feels different. You definitely know you're channeling somebody who is just not your grandfather or grandmother.
Yeah, that's interesting because it kind of brings a new element into understanding these beings. Are they, I mean, is it fair to say it's almost like you touched on the vibrations, and that was one of the questions I was going to ask. It's obviously a different energy or vibration level that they're communicating with you on. Is it almost like an interdimensional type of thing that they're able to do these sorts of things, the way that they're able to channel and communicate? To me, it's just fascinating. I mean, that, they're able to have these abilities, but how, I mean, it's probably difficult to describe, but how, I mean, is it kind of an interdimensional thing that they're able to do, or how does that exactly work?
Yes, it is. So let's say that our mind is able to reach a fifth dimensional energy. When you practice and meditate, and your mind is able to connect with that unknown, with that energy about there. So that's what I would call the fifth dimensional energy. All these beings, Pleidians, Arcturians, Syrians, let's say Orions, they can lower themselves down into the fifth dimensional energy rather easily. Some of them has a higher dimension, but the fifth dimension is a safer realm for the communication. Now, when you go down to the fourth dimension, that is somehow of the energy of the heaven, of this spirits that we talk about. And of course, we come to the physical body, that is the third dimension. We know there is a rule. Even if, I would not channel it, there must be some logic behind it. That there is a rule. When we are born in these bodies, we lose our consciousness about the lives before. And some of the spirits, when they go to the four-dimensional energy and you channel them, they do have some recollection, if not, well, they don't have it all, because they will tell all of, us or share. Maybe they cannot, we don't know that, but they do have much more information than we have. Now we have a children or the people who are born in the early age, they can speak about their past lives. So there is something that there is. So I'm sorry, I don't want to get off the topic, but if we reach up higher in our dimension and connect with them in that fifth dimension energy, then you have a communication.
Interesting. Yeah, so it's kind of like it kind of leads you to believe that this stuff is all connected. When we pass on, we go to a different vibration, energy level, but it's all kind of connected, and that's what's interesting about it. Now, you talk about the term starseed. Can you explain what that means, starseed?
So the starseeds are literally the alien among us. Let's make a little fun out of it. To me, the starseed is a soul that, of course, embodied the body. And within your soul, you remember that you had many past lives. You would go all the way back in the Atlantis or Lemuria. And you okay?
I apologize.
Sorry.
Okay.
And
I'm recovering.
recover. Let's play and send you some healing out there. So the stars.
I just had a drink of water and it went down the wrong way. So
I understand.
I apologize for that.
To me as well.
All right, go ahead. I apologize.
So the starseeds are, the souls living in the human body, and they have a recollection. But they don't have to have a recollection, but they lifetime spans all the way up there into ancient Egypt, Atlantis, and maybe even Lemuria. But what is most important, that the souls had a life before coming down on the earth. So they would experience that they have a life, let's say in the Pleiadians or Sirius. Now, naturally, when our soul joined in this universe, this was the beautiful, or is the beautiful universal mind, very, very intelligent universe. And agnostics call the soul group Sophia. The name is not always the most important thing, but there's came this group of the souls that join this universe. And this group of the souls have a various experiences or are sent into different levels. So the starseeds would go this experience when they go to the different planets. And let's say the last life before, well, the life when they join the Earth experiment was on this particular planet that they remember. So being a starseed meaning that you are remembering life beyond the Earth.
Interesting. So you're recalling things that perhaps the ordinary person would not recall, maybe about past lives, other
Yes.
places you've been, that sort of thing. Okay. Interesting. Now, can you talk a little bit about the Pleiadian Star Nation, exactly who they are and how they, I guess I would say how they interact with us? What is kind of their purpose for interacting with us?
So the Pleiadian Star Nation is I would say, the one who came up with this Earth experiment. To understand them, we need to look at the beings who were way evolved than we are today. I mean, all of them up there are way evolved than we are today. And before they even journey down on the Earth, they were looking to answer the same questions we are looking for today. How do we ascend out of this universe? Same like many people are looking today, is there only the life on the Earth? Is there something else? Can we ascend? Can we go somewhere up there? Is it in this universe? Is it further out there? So they were looking at the same, they were thinking along the same ways. And eventually they found this beautiful planet Earth and realized that on the Earth, everything is heightened up. So everything in this universe is split into duality. And they were amazing researchers, scientists, healers. And they were thinking, well, let's look at the Earth and let's feel how this duality feel in its fullness. So I do believe that they were the first one who started to project Lemuria. Now, Lemuria and Atlantis were supposed to be extraterrestrial projects that were not meant to grow beyond what we're having today into full grown up humanity and alternation life on the earth. Now, I'm talking about it to understand how they are working with us today. Obviously, something went wrong. We decided to stay here for a long time to fix what went wrong. And what is their purpose today is to help us to heal our soul so we can return back home. Not only those star seeds, but those earth seeds who have are created here, that they eventually can rise into multiplanetary beings. I think that is probably the goal of everybody, well, not everybody, but of many of us on the earth. Wouldn't that be wonderful that we find out that there is a alien life and that we may be an equal part of them? So that's what they are helping us. They are not here to miraculously heal us. They are here to show us how we can heal ourselves. Whenever it's the physical healing, with them is very much the soul healing, our emotional healing. So we become better beings and we will stop distracting ourselves here. Because if we want to be a multiplanetary beings, we have to stop distracting ourselves here before we go anywhere else.
Yeah, and that's interesting. So I think they use the term in the book ancient ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
When we say ancient ancestors, or when you say that, are you talking about that they basically seeded life here? Is that what we're saying when you say they were our ancient ancestors?
Yes, it wasn't only them. There were another star nation who contribute into the seeding of humanity. Um, I believe there were 12 of them, but they may have been a little bit more of them. But those were those first star nation who joined here: Andromeda, Sirius, Lyra, Orion, and the others. And they have contributed DNA to upgrade the primates, their life. And so they would become the human slaves and eventually out of them grow to humanity. It was not done intentionally, and definitely it was not done to harm anybody. But yep, I do believe that they are our ancient ancestors.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's the ancient alien theories. They have the Ancient Alien show on history.
Yes.
they talk a lot about these sites, Göbekli Tepe. Of course, you
Mhm.
look at the ancient Egyptian sites. Do you have reason to believe that they actually had a hand in the creation of those types of structures?
Yes, I actually think the Göbekli Tepe is the one where there may have been going on genetic experiments. It's just a feeling. I can't really, have a logical proof for it, but it's in the right area up there. And the pictures when you see, on what you can see online, would point up to it, would point out to all kind of the creatures and the animals that may have lived back then. We know that these aliens have combined their DNA with the animal DNA. The original reason for it was for their own survival. So let's say that there was this group of the aliens, who live here and thrive here or wanted to thrive here. And in the Atlantis, they wanted to create a more physical structures and the building, have a more solid bodies. They needed they needed a component of the earth that will give you this. Now, make it simple. I always compare it to the Project Mars. We know that the Elon Musk is working on this, right? The colony on the Mars. Eventually, if we have scientists, researchers, doctors who will figure it out how to tweak their DNA so their survival on the Mars is much, much easier, that they may grow food from the Mars that will support they digestive system, their organs. If they can tweak their lungs so they can breathe the air on the Mars, we know that these people will accept it and understand it, and they will do it, right? I think they will do it. And so the same thing literally happened here. So the original merge of the DNA would be with the animals, not with the primates. Later on, the primates were upgraded into a more intelligent species, so they will be slaves. And then the other aliens work to enslave them or to free them so they can, because they had our DNA, so they could be equal beings eventually.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, you mentioned the slave aspect of this. What is there a specific type of ETs that were trying to enslave us, and were the Pleidians the ones that were trying to kind of free us from that?
Well, that is really a hard question to answer. So we know that there were Anunnakis in the Samaria. I do believe that the Anunnakis were a merge of the various star nations. Now, the Lyra may have been the main one, but I would say that there would be the beings of all different star nations. Now, when let's call it the human project started, a lot of other beings from different star nations what were here, even the Pleiadians, were tricked or were betrayed into believing that this is something that was approved by what we would call the Council of Light. So let's say there would be some higher council who says, okay, you can go down to the earth, but you will not interfere with the life that is already evolving. I do believe that was the original deal. And then, we were here and we tweak our DNA. The DNA had a side effects, which means to developing of what we would call today an ego, right? The animal ego that we all have, can't shake it off, just have to work through it. And that, unfortunately, started to create this lower vibration as the greed, possessions, anger, feeling more than the other, and so much on. It was, I believe, originally just a side effect. And so there were several places of the Atlantis and these beings, to move into different parts of the earth, because the earth is a huge place. So those who would settle in the Samaria most likely were like, oh, we don't want to dig this gold ourselves. Let's create us something. So the first ever is half animal, half, let's say, the human projects that didn't really work out, that were horrific. And they asked the Council of Light for the approval. It was not approved, but nobody else knew it. At least that's what I feel and what I channel from it. So they hired the amazing, again, researchers, doctors, scientists from especially Virgo, Lyra, Andromeda, Pleiadians, And they told them that this project has been approved and that they can create a human slaves. So many various beings from the different star nations were literally betrayed into believing that what they are creating is for good, that they, if the Council of Light agrees to it, then it must be okay. And, I don't know what they were thinking is going to happen to it. But again, let's compare it to something what we know, because I think it helps us to understand this better. Today we have a cancer researchers who work with mice in the laboratories, and it is absolutely acceptable kind of the thing. Even though they have to, humanly put to sleep a lot of them, they do save the higher purpose for the research for the cure. So, that may have been the way how these doctors and researchers were looking at that project, because primates to them were, very lower intelligent beings. And I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings how I'm saying it, but let's try to look at it from the point of these scientists. And then eventually, these humans were created and they were taken out of the project. And then later on, they realized that they have created something horrible. That's something that they should not have created. And so eventually Samaria and the Anunnaki split between the two. As the story says, we have Enki, who was a good one, and here we have Enlil, who is the bad and the evil one. And then the rescue project started, because for that, to upgrade the primates, they needed a DNA. The Zacharias teaching, read from his tablets that they, mix the ash right from the earth and so much on. But I do think his work is phenomenal. But I do think goes a little bit beyond that. I think that they went into the storage. Let's say that we have the storage of the original DNA of the families who came here on the earth, because eventually we perfected the process. You come here, you get a shot of the DNA, and your body is working well. So they took that DNA and they used that DNA for this future be humans. And so when everything got exploited, which I think took a considerable time, there were a lot of those who had hurt feelings, who felt betrayed, but there was not a turning point back. And so they decided to save these beings, to save the humans, to give them freedom. So at least they will be have a chance in the evolution and again become the planetary beings as the rest of them were.
Interesting. And you talk about the connections in the book, obviously Pleidians, the Andromedans, and then the Syrians. They all seem to kind of have this connection. What is that connection? How are they working together?
All right, so they work in the Trinity. 3 is like the magical number of all this universe. Pleiadians have energy. Their main energy go for the soul and the soul healing. So they are connected to the emotions and how it affects us, how it blocks us, and so much on. And let's go to the Syrians. Syrians' energy is the mind. So Syrians are the knowledge keeper. They connect to that energy of the mind, and they put the logic into the emotions. Because if you have, if your soul is here to experience something, you need to have some logical explanation of what is happening to you. You need to collect the data. And the Andromedians are the masters of the body. They are the best healers that anybody can find if you guys need a healer. So they would have that energy of the body. So in different words, Andromedians would be specialists on the healing the body from all kind of the problems. Syrians would be the specialist on preserving the knowledge, writing the books, searching for the knowledge, making the podcast so the people can find the truth. And the Pleiadians would go into it and they says, okay, look at your emotions. You cannot always feel bad about it. You need to feel positive because your emotions affecting the mind. If you are feeling bad, your mind falls into the ego problems and it suddenly make the body sick. So that's how they work together, mind, mind, soul, and the body.
Now, it's interesting because you talk about these as light beings. We obviously have something called a UFO phenomena, or as the government now likes to say, unidentified aerial phenomena. It's obviously a real thing. I've been following it for over 20 years now, well over 20 years, somewhat quietly for several years. These craft that are visiting us, we know they're coming. We know they're visiting us. Some of these beings that you're talking about, are they visiting us in this fashion? Are these other civilizations? Can you kind of talk to that and maybe how they may be visiting us?
Well, there may be a few aspects of it, or let's look at at least two angles of it. So I have seen the UFO twice in my life, so I'm a true believer in them, even before I, believe in all of that. And the second time was a very interesting because there would be probably six of us who would be staring at this big light into the woods, just a few meters away from us, and we all were just hypnotized, and nobody would walk there. We just walk, it was by the restaurant. We just walk into the restaurant, go have a drink. And nobody wondered that this is weird, that you don't see it, anything like that, or it's even impossible to be there. There are the encounters, I think, that may just help us in the activation, help you to reconnect that energy, that memory. Because when you're starting to have that reconnection of your memory, you suddenly realize, okay, there are the things that I remember inside of me about these encounters, that this is not just one time that it happened, but they are, I may remember them from the other lifetimes. So there are those that supervise, I would say, our evolution. They may be their part for the activation. Of course, we're not going to talk about the negative aliens because they are here as well. The spaceship may be seen as well, and we know that they work maybe with the government or so much on. It's not really proven, or we're not going to go into the depths on uncover it here because I don't know too much about it.
Sure, sure.
But there's another part of this spacecraft. What if they, we know that there's a life inside of the Earth. We know that many of these beings, by the end of the Lemuria or the Atlantis, withdraw themselves and they live inside of the inner Earth. And we know that there are aircraft or spacecrafts coming from the ocean, go somewhere, coming back here. They're coming from the Mount Shasta, which has been documented, and so much on. So I do believe that some of it is, maybe document the level of where we are, making sure we will not distract ourselves. And they have a very thriving life inside of the Earth.
Wow. Yeah, that's fascinating because I have heard a lot of talk about that. They are among us, and it's certainly, you hear of craft. Some people have termed them USOs, craft that come out of the water. They appear to be kind of a multi-dimensional. They can travel through multi-mediums, water, air, you name it. I guess the question I want to ask, and I want to get to the Greys, because there is a lot of talk about the Greys. They seem to be very prevalent in abductions. The Travis Walton abduction, it sounded like that was your typical Greys. Perhaps the Roswell, if you believe that the Roswell crash happened and the bodies were recovered.
I do.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like the typical Greys. I'm wondering if you have any insight into what the Greys may be here for and how they kind of fit into this overall bigger picture.
So, in my energy work, I'm connected with a few of the Greys. I cannot say that I have seen them with my eyes, but I felt their energy. Now, we know that the Greys aliens have been created by the reptilians as their slaves, as they sort of, doing their dirty work and so much on. And that's what they were made for. That's what, they following up their orders. There definitely are even other star nations that have been enslaved by the reptilians. Now, before I go into reptilians, I want to just to set the record straight. There are good reptilians and there are bad reptilians. Because I do read for a lot of people who are freaked out that they connect with the reptilians. There are good reptilians as well. We have to look at it. There are good people and the bad people. There are good aliens and there are bad aliens. So some of these bad reptilians have enslaved, especially the Mintaka and Mintakian beings. And there's one more. And the Regal, they have been a very, very vicious star nations before they change around. And so anyway, long story short, so they created the Greys, and the Greys are following the orders, whatever they have to do. However, some of these Greys come to the healers very randomly. And what they want to do, they want to give you an information. They want to share with you what they were doing to people so they can, in a way, redeem themselves and even go back home. So even these Greys are changing in a way and believing that there is a different life out for them. They usually show the healers an implant because they are very big on setting the implants for the mind control, usually, right, into humans. And, if humans have implant, whenever they will be energetic implants, or some people find a physical implant. So what I usually work with, we work only with the energetic implants because I have no means to detect a physical implant and so much on. So they work on this mind control. And of course, there is an agenda who eventually would like to take over the earth. And there's an agenda of the Pleidians and the others who says, oh no, let's keep it a freedom place that we have a all equal chance to be who we are.
Interesting.
I know you have a specific question about probably the grace, so you can ask.
Well, I think you kind of covered it there. There's just been a lot of, in abduction cases, a lot of mention of Greys and a lot of mention of kind of this almost robotic sense to them. Like they're kind of just almost not really concerned so much about what they're doing to their subjects, maybe.
That's true. I believe that is true. But, let's say that there will be a 90% of them and there's a 10% of them who somehow come to that consciousness. It's almost like our awakening because the energy is moving forward when they come and says like, oh, this is wrong. But there are, let's take this abduction for a little bit. There are several, I would say, differences in the abduction. The sum of them, there's the persons, which is a very invasive, very traumatic, and very horrible experience. And you may wonder, why is this even happening? Do they want to see where the humankind is? Do they have an order to taking there an experiment? Where are we evolutionary? Are we, how may be well controlled what it is. There's another kind of the abduction which I work with my clients, is that the people are taking in the spaceship and they are experimented on how we can heal this and that kind of the illness. So because the word abduction already give you the goosebumps, like you goes like, oh my god, I was on the spaceship, I was abducted. So naturally, everybody in their head has that it has to be a horrible thing. You get probed by the gray aliens, there's something up there. Everybody, have the, the image. And we see, if you think of it, the movies that are produced about the aliens really are, majority of them are supposed to raise fears inside of you. So you will never figure it out that you may be the alien or you may be the good alien. But there are those also, who, let's say the little green people, which I think are Arcturians, which very often are confused for this, for the grays. I go and they study, if somebody has what we would call the uncured illness, how it can be cured, or what they would not cure you, but they may implant some kind of the seeds of the knowledge within you, where you can eventually come to that awakening knowledge of it when it puts you on this journey. Because if you remember that you have been on the spaceship and you go like, okay, I'm being abducted, then you go over the fears that, okay, maybe it wasn't a bad thing because here I am and there's nothing wrong with me. On contrary, I started searching for it, and you may come up for something that you would not look ordinary.
Yeah, the thing I find interesting too is some people that experience abductions, they seem to have this kind of awakening.
Yeah.
You know, almost like a spiritual awakening, if you will. And that's kind of that seems to be kind of the positive aspect of this, is that some of the people that experience this, for some it is a positive experience.
Yes, it is.
Others, it's just absolutely terribly frightening. And I find that kind of dichotomy there with, different abduction cases interesting, because some are absolutely fearful and others come back and seem to develop this deeper sense of spirituality out of it. So, there doesn't seem to be, it doesn't seem to be all bad. And in fact, I've had Preston Dennett on the show, and he's talked about healings and, how a lot of people have claimed to have been healed during these encounters or these abductions. And it's interesting. So, this brings up this is kind of segue into my next question is, you mentioned that there's been several, and I've heard this before, you're not the first to say this, there's been several that have been involved in our creation. So that begs the question, how many, can you even kind of quantify how many different ETs, alien civilizations, have a stake on Earth and what's going on here? Can we even say that?
Well, I'm aware of the 12. Of course, they may have possibly be a little bit more, but I think that originally there were 12 different star nations. If you think of it, our DNA is 12 plus 1, which would be the 13 strands of the DNA, but the 12 is the main one, the 13, the one extra would stand for the human DNA. So if there's a whole big healing explanation, which we don't have to go into it about that. But let's say there have been 12, so there would be a 12-star nation who have a stake in the Earth. Eventually, they split. Everything is split between the light and the dark. It's the duality. It's a normal thing. You can look at it that Earth is like a game piece, like a Monopoly game. And there are these 12 star nations, standing up there somewhere in the cool place by the table, and they roll the dice, and here we buy that, and we're going to sell that, and let's make an awakening in that. We also know that it's a training place. I would say that originally, perhaps it was a game, it was an experiment, it was like, how far we can go. But then they all got trapped here. We all got trapped here, and we have to learn that maybe the arrogance that these aliens had didn't work out in the greatest way, and they all have to learn to be survivalists, because we know that when they started here, that they devolve, because they didn't continue on that way. And let's say if they were all done, they would all leave by the end of the Atlantis and says, oh, they can do whatever they want, defend for themselves, but they didn't. So we know that they don't take a significant amount of the humans to God know where, So don't want to make it sound bizarre. So we are not here to be harvested for something. We are here to, I think, to observe the evolution. So I'm getting tangled in this one.
Well, the interesting thing is they seem to have a stake in how we're treating the planet,
Yes.
and about our nuclear proclivities, if you will, our desire to, test and develop nuclear weapons. Going all the way back to World War II, the Manhattan Project. So many sightings around those, and then, moving on from there, there's stories of, us testing nuclear weapons and then being shot out of the air. It's interesting. They seem to have a concern for what we're doing in that area. What's kind of your sense for You said there's different beings. Are some of them perhaps the badder side of the more malevolent beings, kind of helping us to develop these technologies? I mean, kind of how do you get a sense for how they're interacting with us on this?
Well, the first of all, as you said, I also heard the stories when they completely disabled the nuclear weapons, so it would not work out, right? And I think anybody would, if you think, if we are correct that there's a thriving alien life inside of the Earth, then they have a stake inside of the Earth. If I have this amazing basis and the life of Pleidians and Andromedians and Syrians and let's say, who else, then I would make sure that the Earth is not destroyed, that I would control you on how far you go and what you're going to do. Because when the Earth is shattered into the pieces, like Maldek possibly did, it's not going to be good for the neither of them. Since the first time I started to, first what I thought I'm channeling, first thing that Pleiadian says, the Earth is the important position, place in this universe, and it's very important that that Earth will survive. I never got complete understanding of it, except that, there are the aliens living inside of the Earth. It is also a training place. What if the Earth is the one of the surviving places, and maybe many of those planets are beyond the habitation and so much on, and so they are thriving inside of it. Now, this is just my speculation, and I do believe there's a life on the other planets out there that I honestly believe. But for some reason, they like the Earth. Earth has a lot of to offer to experience. I would say, even that emotional and the physical aspect of the life that I do think they do enjoy. Now, this, as you said, would these malevolent beings would give us this technology that we would destroy ourselves? That is something to think about it. Obviously, the first what comes to your head goes like, yep, absolutely. Somebody must give you the, it's like this bad being who gives you the matches that you're going to set yourself on fire. It's up there. But I don't think it is. I think that the Earth is going in a cycle of the energy, memories, evolution. We are going through this evolutional cycle that takes probably thousands, if not millions of years. And so we come to the peak of our intelligence and then we devolve. So let's say the last time we came here on the peak of our intelligence would be somewhere in the Atlantis, in the Atlantean age. That was the highest. Now, the harmony was not, kept because the intelligent mind that we know is the source of this universe became stronger and overpowering than the energy of the soul. I think that's why there's a variety of star nations here to keep the balance. We have our emotional, holistic aspect and we have our intellectual aspect. They need to go hand in the hand together. So last time the peak of intelligence was somewhere in the Atlantis. Then, of course, the Egypt, post-cataclysm in the Egypt was still amazing, and we still have a lot of technology, but we started to devolve, or these beings started to devolve, and then eventually everybody was born into the human body. So the cycle went over, and we're coming back into the time of the Atlantean energy. And I would say this is why we have a much more sighting and people awakening, and some of these beings come to you and tell you, you are Pleiadian, and you did this, and you did that we remember that they are our ancestors. It would be cool if I wake up in the morning and I'm Pleiadian, but it doesn't work like that. We just have that, ancestor energy and the memory and belief into human body. So I would say that probably would lead into it that there's that much more activity. We are coming into the most evolved technological era. I believe that at 2012, the calendar, the Mayan calendar, and that for the reason that we can start our own, our new destiny of the earth. If you look at the Mayan calendar, we can continue in whatever was predicted or repeat all that cycle, or we can start our own. There's a lot of channel information. There's some Egyptian prophecy, which I'm not that familiar about, that's saying that the next about 10, 13, 18 years. So the Pleiadians went about the 13 years. According to Egyptian prophecy, will be next 18 years. Now, starting from the 2000, we have this opened the window of opportunity to shift the Earth in totally different gear than it was heading to. So I'm sorry, I'm going back and forth. So we know that naturally we're going into the most advanced age. And there's going to be probably even worse weapons than the nuclear technology. Imagine if they put the satellites around the Earth, from the satellites, what all you can control and what kind of the weaponry you can have in those satellites. Because humans like to weaponize the gifts that they get. And we're going to go into the chips and the higher technology. And look at the Elon Musk, what he's doing, right? Like, Neuralinks and so much on. Eventually, it's going to be the future. And so, yeah, go.
No, I was going to say that, yeah, that is where we're headed, it seems. I mean, if you look at where China's going in ASAT technology, and a lot of people say, that's the next wave here. We just established a Space Force. We had the 1968 Outer Space Treaty, but it seems like that's kind of going by the wayside. Slowly and slowly, it seems like we're moving into space and weaponizing space. And that has to be a concern, I would think, for some of these star nations. A lot of people say, and, I watch the shows like the Unidentified show that's been on history and To the Stars Academy. A lot of people say that we're going to paint this as a national security threat, and that's going to kind of lead us into weaponizing space and into growing these greater weapons. And that's one of the reasons we're going to justify it, is that, we have these UFOs, these UAPs that are flying with impunity in our airspace. And, I'm speaking from U.S. viewpoint here, U.S. national security viewpoint, and we can't do anything about it. And we better figure out how to do something about it, because it's a national security threat. Yeah. Now, again, I'm holding the viewpoint of maybe perhaps our military leaders, the way they're kind of starting to paint this. And a lot of people says that's going to lead us into weaponizing space. And, we're going to kind of start moving in that direction, partially because of this threat and what we're going to say is a national security threat. Kind of
I'm sorry to cut you off. But look at this way. What if before this happened, what if we really have this window to realize that they are not a threat, that we are like them? If there are many people who wake up and it says, okay, they are my ancestors, we are like them, they are not going to be a threat. If you look at all these Pleiadians, everybody who channels the Pleiadians, I would say most of them, they says that they are here to give us a knowledge so we can progress. Definitely, they don't want us to progress into weaponizing the space and, the shooting other people down. They says, progress so you can learn, so you can become more smarter, and you can be responsible with all the technology that you are using. And that is maybe our chance to turn this around, because yes, there is a trajectory rate where we can go. But if suddenly, something happened, and more people awaken, they realize that they don't have to weaponize it. They suddenly realize that we, don't have to separate one another, each other. I mean, look at us humans, how we look at the different races and countries and so much on, and add the aliens to it. I mean, what a mess that would be. So maybe we have this rare window and the opportunity where we can, when we can bring the awareness about it, and people will think twice about it, or those in the power will suddenly says, well, let's do it differently. How about we make that heart and the mind connection and we use it differently? Same like, we're going to come into the age of Atlantis. How are we going to do it that we don't distract ourselves? Because the more we push for this, protective kind of the technologies, eventually going to distract us, and we're going to go back down into the devolution instead of the evolution. And of course, these aliens must be just laughing out there what we are doing, how we think that we are smart and so much on. So that's what I think this window is for the change. And yeah.
Yeah, and I think Dr. Stephen Greer, and I don't know if you're familiar with his
Yes, I
work.
am. Yeah.
Yeah, he really has been a strong proponent of pushing against that, if you will, that these, craft or these UFOs,
Mhm.
these ETs that are visiting us are not threatening. They're not, and a lot of people would say if they were going to do us harm, they probably would have done so a long time ago.
That's what I just wanted to say.
Yeah, and so you have to ask that question. If they really wanted to do us harm, why wouldn't they have already done so? But then you go to the flip side of that and say if they are very concerned about nuclear developments, if you go all the way back to us dropping the bombs on Japan, they didn't prevent that from happening. Two atomic bombs dropped on Japan in 1945. They didn't prevent all the nuclear testing that happened in the 50s and 60s and underground testing. Some of it's still going on today. So you have to say that stuff is still going on. They haven't prevented it. Notwithstanding that, we talked about they have interfered with our nuclear sites, our,
Mhm.
our launch. That is, there's been many witnesses have come forward and talked about that. But, I would say the skeptic's going to say, well, they didn't prevent any of that stuff from happening.
That's a pretty good look at it. What if we, as a humanity, needed to see our destructive power? I know that a lot of people were hurt, and I actually work with the people with Japan, and we're doing, the healing for this. And it's horrible to feel it. Same, it is horrible to feel it. And yet it wasn't prevented. What if some of these things do have to happen to us so we see what a destructive species we are? As bad as it is that part has been destroyed, but there was a small part in the earth. I mean, I can't justify the life that have been lost and what horrible things have happened. But since then, we all step back and says we can't use it. And I do pray that we will never ever use that technology. When something happened to them, I would say they probably see it on the smaller scale than we see it. Of course, somebody who live there, who have a family there or something, there's no excuse and there's no explanation to it. But we, rest of us, see how horrible it is. I want to compare it to the World War II because they didn't stop completely everything. Look how many people die, like in the whole, I know that that ended the World War II or was in the end of it. But once I did a reading, which was very interesting, and there was this whole soul group who says, we came here to be to be sacrificed in the Holocaust. And I felt like, is it even true what I'm feeling? And they says, we came here to show the humanity how dysfunctional this is, and if this is what you want to do to each other. So it was an interesting kind of the reading. It resonated with the person that we read it, but you feel this collective sacrifice that the souls came to do. Of course, when you are in the human body and you're living that life, you don't want to even connect to it or agree that you will ever agree to something like to it. But a similar thing happened to in the people in the 9/11 who says, whichever way it happened, they says a lot of people channel and they says these people were born that they will make that collective sacrifice to see how wrong we do to each other, what the wrong things we are doing. So what if these aliens looking in this way as, we let you destruct yourself to some kind of the point. But if you would go to the destruction that will completely destruct the earth, we stop you. If you look
That's
back
where they're
into
going to
the
draw the line. Yeah.
I think so. If you look back into the history, Noah built the ark. We do think that an ark has been a DNA, carried the DNA instead of the animals and so much on. They did not save the whole that part of the, let's say, Mesopotamia or that part that died, but they saved the DNA and the human race grow again. So we do not want to get to that. I think they are teaching us that we will find our own way, that we will stop each other. that we help to open the eyes of those who go and are in that mind of the I have to own this, I have to just be the dictators, and so much on.
I have to ask, it's kind of a little bit off subject here, but I got to ask the question.
Yes.
I don't know if you're familiar with the Phoenix Lights, the 1997 Phoenix Lights incident, over 10,000 witnesses to very large craft. I have heard it mentioned by a few people, and I'm not going to say by people who are UFO researchers or whatnot. I've heard it mentioned that the Pleiadians were responsible for that event. Do you have any knowledge of that and their involvement in it?
So it is funny. So of course, I heard it many times, but I never done a really good reading about it. But when you say, I was like, yep, that was the Pleiadians. It feels like that it was the Pleiadians. And if you think of the Phoenix Life are on the latitude of the 33, that is actually one of the reasons I moved on to South Carolina, because I'm on the latitude of the 33. It is the energy line, power line, which actually 33 is connected somehow. I read about it, don't know, explained very well, to the Pleiadian star cluster. So I do believe those were Pleiadians. And I think that, again, they're showing us, because when you see the lights, when you see this sighting, first of all, there is the significant energy that comes out of it. Next of it, it makes you research it, makes you question it. It makes you that you don't believe everything that everybody says. And I was just, even, what I'm saying, I always tell people, go and research. Don't believe blindly what everybody says. Go and watch for these lights. Try to connect with them. It's not that hard to connect with these Pleiadians. It's not that hard to connect with the beings from the inner earth. You just have to have a little patience. That's it.
Yeah, and what I find fascinating about that case, and it's one of my favorite UFO cases, a lot of, and over 10,000 witnesses, and including Governor Fife Symington, I'm messing up his name here, had finally, eventually, when he left politics, came out and spoke out about it. But there was a lot of people that claimed to have had this feeling, just this positive feeling, almost like they were getting some sort of telepathic message, like nothing to be afraid of. We're kind of just here to let you know we're here. And there was a lot of people that kind of spoke of having that kind of experience out of it. In other words, the majority of people seemed to all have a positive experience about it. None were fearful. You didn't have people, freaking out. You didn't have people that were panicking. Most people just kind of watched in awe as these large craft,
I think it very much feels like my experience in the Czech Republic. And so I came here in the 98. So my experience in the last one was, I think, in the 97. It just was a few months before we came here. And it was the same feeling. And it's, interesting, the time, right? That feeling of everything's okay. Don't worry. Just do your thing. And, there's this really good feeling out of them. And if you think of it, if they would be an invasive species, how many people they could kill? I mean, these aliens in these crabs, they have so many. I mean, they are highly advanced than we are. Their technology is probably much more advanced than we are. If they want to wipe out of the earth, they can do it probably in quite a short period of the time. And they don't. They do not land here and just to come and give us a law or, some universal laws that they would bestow upon us, because we don't want it collectively. If there would be all of us, or I says majority of the humanity, or at least in the United States, who would be agreed to it, that may possibly happen, but it doesn't. So I would say they follow a free will law. They want, to let them know that they are here. I mean, from this, if you think of it from the crashes, like in the Roosevelt or somewhere else, of course, the government rescued the technology and they back reverse the technology, and they have this technology. So if you think of, you live in the duality and there has to be harmony, you have to have a good aliens or Pleiadians or somebody else who gives you the other counterpart of it, who says, okay, if somebody would be misusing this for this, we're going to give you this, we're going to give you knowledge, and perhaps, think of it, how many people probably, you say how many people saw it in the Phoenix, how many people of it got into that research and totally different way of the life just because they had that experience. So it balances it.
Yes. Yes, it's a fascinating case, and again, one of my favorite because it just seemed to be so many positive takeaways from the event, the documentary that was created. It was really good. It was a really good story. A lot of people had a great experience out of it, and it was really interesting. Eva, I thank you so much for joining me tonight. It's been a absolutely intriguing, fascinating conversation. It's enlightening. It's interesting, and certainly opens my eyes to why we may be having these sightings and why they may be visiting us here. It's really is. It's just intriguing stuff. Can you share for the listeners how they find your work, where they go to find your books, and any other work you do, the energy work you do, and all that?
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on your show. I very much enjoyed, and I very much enjoy to talk about this extraterrestrial and UFO because I usually talk about healing. So it was very nice to share and look at all those, the different aspects of all of this because they go hand in hand. Yeah, and you can find me. I have a website, www.evamarquez.org. And my books are on the Amazon. They are in the ebooks form. So now there's a wish for the real books future that definitely is going to happen. But they are on the ebook. And if you guys have an Amazon Prime, you can read 3 of them for free.
Oh, wow. So. Cool. I'll definitely look into that. Well, once again, thank you so much for joining me on the show. That's one of the most fascinating discussions I've had. I really enjoyed it, and really hope the listeners enjoyed it tonight too. Have a great rest of your night, and thanks again.
The same to you. Thank you so much, and thank you for all you do.